So at this point, I'm hoping that Dr. Summers can hop on and help us address some of the questions that are likely to come about from the USDA notification that happened yesterday. Dr. Summers.
Yeah, well, yeah, where do I begin? I would say, I guess so. Yes, just kind of coming back. First off, thanks for the opportunity to be here, and very good presentation from everybody. I think these are very good key points that the industry needs to, be, brought up to speed on, and just kind of working through those biosecurity. I mean, it really remains a very important part of disease transmission for any disease, but especially in the face of H5N1. So, from my perspective here, just a couple of comments. First off, the federal order that came out yesterday, we are waiting here between us and USDA at the Department of Ag. We're waiting on a further guidance document. This guidance document will have a little bit more clarification, hopefully, on channeling down some of these broader concepts into something more manageable so we can have a better idea of what we actually are looking at as far as if it's required reporting and testing. Let me see if I got that. There we go. That works. Yeah, thank you. So we're waiting on this guidance document to come out. There are myself, most of the state animal health officials across the U.S., and a large group of USDA APHIS veterinary services staff are all asking ourselves the same question on behalf of the industry in terms of how are we going to make this work? There's a lot of things with this that have been frustrating on many fronts, especially from the industry side, that we're trying to figure out how we can pull this thing together with such speed as this was kind of hastily put in front of the United States. And it's going to create some challenges. So I'm looking at this with, some grace as we kind of work through these early phases. And we will continue to have a lot of conversations about how we're going to implement this in many ways. The language in it right now, basically in effect, just not to reiterate at the beginning, but there's going to be required mandatory testing and reporting for interstate movements. It does not speak to intrastate movements. Okay, so from farm to farm within the state, there's no requirement for that. But if those tests were to happen, the reports would still have to be channeled through the state animal health official's office to USDA for reporting. So the reporting mechanism and the testing mechanism, though, for interstate movements, so from state to state, can only be done through the known labs. So that would have to be done here at our lab, but it does not exclude private labs or universities for whatever reason to perform such tests. But those tests can only be for, on-farm known cases potentially or intrastate movements, but you still have to report. So anything from the privatized sector, so to speak, that is deemed non-negative would get routed to us. We would repeat that test and through the known system, and then further message that to NVSL. A lot of questions about what is going to be tested. Right now we are hoping, and I have advocated on behalf of National Assembly, which is the state animal health officials collective group. We've advocated hard, as have many people, AABP and many industry partners, to allow dairy cull cows to become exempted in this testing process, but it may not exempt them from reporting of movements. So a couple of things just kind of in this bigger scheme here is, if you're a dairy premise and you have any opportunity that you want to move animals across state lines, I suggest you start right now by getting a premise ID number established, because that will be the first marker that we will have for tracking these movements. It is considered an official test, so the animals will have to have official IDs. So there's no reason right now, just, it takes 10 minutes to go onto the website at ODA and register your premise. So there's some things there that kind of go along with the comments about continuity of business and secure milk supply. Is, Prem ID is an important part of that. But again, the animals that need to be tested, the capacity of our ability to test, the reporting mechanism, all of that was never thought through before the order came out. We never had any time to do that. So we're kind of working through some of those options here as we wait for this order, or the guidance document from the order. I will say that we have gotten a lot of calls. There's going to be some challenges within the industry. It, it, there were voices concerned that the industry not have an opportunity to provide input before the federal order was put out, which I think would have been helpful on multiple fronts. There's a lot of people that are dedicated and passionate about livestock agriculture that have offered a lot of good opportunities. But unfortunately, that was not provided before the order went out. So that will create some challenges. My commitment to Ohio is I was a former dairy veterinarian. I get the dairy industry very well. It's kind of near and dear to my heart. So I'm very cautious, but yet flexible on trying to work through some of the challenges here. So, I think what's going to happen is we're going to have to kind of just say, all right, let's just figure out how we're going to get through it. And, we are very understanding of some of those challenges. And I had some calls this morning from veterinarians that posed questions that I hadn't even thought of yet. And I don't have all the answers. So we're going to need industry's input. We're going to need the academic sector's input. We're going to need, herd veterinarians to provide input. So we're going to keep kind of working through it day to day as we see. But kind of at the short end, it is limited right now from what we can tell. The focus and scope is on lactating dairy cattle. What happens in the future, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball on this, but we're just going to focus on doing what we have to do here, and we're going to work through it. But I do want to acknowledge that the dairy there is a lot of strong support that the dairy sequences and the poultry sequences in some of these close proximity premises in other states share some commonalities. That's been pretty broadly cast across multiple different communications networks that that does create a risk, right? I mean, that risk is real. The poultry industry, the swine industry, the dairy industry, biosecurity are on different, sometimes on different wavelengths, but we need to recognize that we can all achieve some biosecurity, right? Success comes in cans here. I can, you can, we can, but we got to get some biosecurity management practices in place to try to prevent, that possibility. We only have one affected herd in Ohio. We have no, other known positive dairies here in the state. Nothing that's been reported to me. So we're still doing really well. Our dairy industry is strong. Our poultry industry is doing a good job keeping their detections and their biosecurity, strong, so they don't have protection. So I couldn't be happier with how Ohio has done. But I will say that Ohio is going to have a lot of teamwork on how to get this thing done. And I recognize that I'll probably be the one that's thought at as the driver of a lot of this stuff, and that's fine. But I'm going to need some help with trying to think through some of these processes that I don't have all the answers for. So I'll pause there, Dr. Habing, and happy to answer any more questions. Or if there's questions in the chat.
Yeah, there's one that came up that's pertinent to you. So in your opinion, are summer dairy cattle shows likely to be canceled?
Oh boy, I was hoping we'd skirt around the fair question. Actually, I have no intent right now. I have no intent of engaging in conversations about canceling or doing anything with our fairs. But I will say, part of the federal order does include interstate movements for milking cows for exhibition purposes. So those animals that would be moving across state lines for the purposes of exhibition would qualify here. That is something that, again, that's a conversation we need to work through and figure out what we're going to do. We recognize that, milk from clinically affected cows has been demonstrated to, potentially contain a high viral load. But we would not obviously be bringing sick cows to an exhibition. There's a conversation that needs to be had about what that might look like on a micro level, but I have no intent right now of engaging in conversations about canceling our shows or doing anything to halt our exhibition programs this summer. But the cattle movements across state lines for the purposes of exhibition will have to be kind of worked through on what that might look like. So that will be kind of a to be determined, but we're gonna take a look at it. The way I look at the county fairs is we've done really well for the last 2 years. The poultry industry and with HPAI around us, showering on us, immersed amongst the U.S. here with migratory waterfowl, we've done really well. There's no reason we should do anything else but maintain the highest levels of intensity of biosecurity when it comes to poultry, when it comes to swine, when it comes to dairy, in order to keep those programs running. So that's really a nod and acknowledgement to the fairs and Ohio's industries.
Yeah, there's no other questions at the moment. What I will say is there was a lot of information about biosecurity presented, and I think it can be hard to figure out how to go about eating that elephant. And what I think is important to keep in mind, and this has already been brought up, is that this process is not about risk elimination, right? We're never going to completely eliminate the risk, but there's some cost-effective, low-hanging fruit things that we can do to mitigate, to reduce that risk, right? So if we're looking to completely eliminate the risk, it's going to be overwhelming and frustrating. But I think any farm can go around their premises and look at with the resources and with the help of their veterinarian and find some relatively easy things to do to start reducing that risk that it's going to get introduced onto their farm. So a question we can answer live: is it likely that asymptomatic cases on farms are driving the retail sample positives? Yeah, so Greg, that's a good question. I can start off with that. And so if the folks on the webinar weren't aware, the FDA came out just a couple of days ago and noted that they were finding some PCR positives in retail milk. And so, of course, in terms of messaging, it's really important to note that this PCR is detecting fragments of the genome from the virus, and that we have not found live virus. So we're finding just dead virus in the milk right now. So, but I think the answer to that question is that are the cases on farms driving the retail sample positives? I think that's likely the case. So it could be that it's much more broadly spread than what we realize, and that the virus is finding its way into retail milk because there's a lot of infections on farms that aren't recognized. But anybody else would like to contribute to that question, please go right ahead. All right, we could finish up a little bit early if we need to, for sure. Thank you for all the speakers and your time and help in preparing this. Dr. Summers, particularly like to thank you for your time. I know you're very busy these days, and appreciate your work.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you for letting me come on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anything else that you all want to add before we sign off? All right, very good. So, like I'd mentioned, I will send out the slides, and our contact information will be on the slides, and you can reach us directly if you have questions about any components for our presentation.
So, Dr. Dabing, there was a question that just came up about seasonality, and so I can try, or I'll yield to you if you want.
Go for it. Yeah.
So I think one of the concerns that I have, and I think others do too, is this entering into our native wild bird populations. And so, we all know that we struggle with those on our dairy farms more in the winter, especially when there's snow on the ground, right? That's when the starlings and the other birds really come in. So it sounds like the reports coming out of the Panhandle of Texas is that this probably really started heavy for them, and maybe even in January, February, so in their winter season. So I think it's potential that we could see it kind of hibernate, if you will, or maybe we don't see it a lot pop up. But I think we need to be vigilant as we go into another winter season where we get more of those birds in and around our feed and in and around our cattle.